Good evening. We're honored to be having this important conversation tonight on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As immigrants and settlers, we are grateful for their stewardship, caring relationship with, and their diverse knowledge and teachings about the land since time immemorial. My name is Jacqueline Lawrence, and I'm your moderator for this evening. I'm a strategist by day, poet by night, and on Saturdays, I'm one of 6 co-hosts that can be heard on CHUO's 89.1 FM, Black on Black. Thank you for joining us this evening. A special welcome to those who have been with us in the past, and for those who this is their first time, welcome. Today, we continue a conversation as we go deeper and dive into the importance of building resilience and moving forward with the help of the Mama Wateli support circles. It is somewhat serendipitous that we're having this dialogue today on the eve of 16 days of activism against gender violence, an international campaign that ends on Human Rights Day, December 10th. The Canadian theme is, "It's not just." With that double meaning, it reminds us of the injustice of gender-based violence and also brings us our attention that we must take action consistently to ensure that this action is minimized and eradicated. I want to begin by opening the space by inviting Susan Namawende, the director of the Mama Wateli support circles and the founder of Mama Wateli, to just share with us a little bit about the Mama Wateli circles. Susan, please.
My name is Susan Namlindo, and it gives me so much pleasure and delight to share this space with you this evening. Thank you for everybody that supports us. We are really grateful, and most of the information about the circles and the history of Mama Wateli we have shared, and we also shared a bit of that in the last webinar that can be accessed both on our website but also here in the slides. Really, in the gist of it, and I'm delighted about the panelists we have today, and I just cannot wait to get into the meat of the conversation today. The thing I can say about the support circles is we want to open dialogue. Sometimes women are not ready to leave, or sometimes they have thought about wanting to leave, but they don't know where to go or where to find information. Mama Support Circles is looking to fill that space where people can meet with peers. Some who have gone through what they're going through, or some that, are not sure if what they're going through is what they're going through, because that can be, something is not right, but you're not sure, is this right or not right? So we're wanting to create a space where women can talk to each other and bounce off ideas. And I have to say, since we started this work, it has been really rewarding to see the interest and the support that we have, both from the community, but also other funders within the region. And all I can say is that we are moving and we are on track. We are going to actually start with partners that are in the hair industry. A Black girl needs to do her hair. And sometimes your hairdresser can be your confidant. And so we're delighted with the partnership that we have been able to secure with beauty profs that is going to help us get some of their beauty professionals trained to be able to be a resource. And we're looking to train some other mentors within the community, people that are trusted by the women that we are trying to reach. So my pitch here is for anybody who thinks they can, even if they think they really don't have anything they can provide, but if you can listen, if you can listen with an intent of just being a bouncing board and not giving advice, because we are not professional and we don't do that, but we support the shoulders. So this is my call out for anybody that can be a mentor. Get in touch with us. And anybody who is just interested in taking part of the training, just to understand, even just to understand what is it that really defines, abuse to just somebody being protective or whatever. We want you to get connected to us so we can have that dialogue, we can get you trained so that we can help the people in our community that need it. And a part of this group is somebody who is unsure, am I going through it? Am I ready to leave? You can sign up to be a resource, or to be a supported person. So we are delighted that the project is moving along, the circles are forming, the mentors are forming, and most of all, we're delighted that you're here either live on the session today, or even if you're watching this afterwards. Please get in touch. Back to you, Jackie.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. I mean, we know the importance of circles, as well as our Indigenous communities have certainly shared with us the power of circles. The circle reminds us that when we are together, there's no beginning and no end. Sometimes it's where I begin, you end, and vice versa. But it's also this reminder that when we're in a circle, there is no hierarchy. We're learning and we're growing side by side with each other. And so that call out that Susan has given us is so important in terms of, as we listen, as we learn and become, there is a support for each other. So really welcome that opportunity for you to be a support moving forward. Before I introduce our panelists, just some key housekeeping items for us. For the participants who are here this evening, we really welcome your questions. They really serve to enhance our conversation and keep you in the circle and in the flow with us and the panelists. So we invite you that if you do have any questions throughout our conversation, to please type them in the Q&A box, and there will be a Q&A section later on so that we can integrate your questions as you listen to our speakers. And now I'm really excited to expand the circle by inviting our panelists for this evening on this conversation about their lived experiences and their views on how do women know it's time to run? What is their exit plan, and how do we shape it? How do we understand it? And how do we make a difference? This is such a critically important topic, so I'm going to just, really invite us to be sensitive to the areas that this may trigger for you, and want to ensure that, again, the contact numbers and names that you hear, this is also something for you to reach out and to gain some support. So I'm very pleased to be joined this evening by Reverend Joan Wairimu, founder of Queen's Ministry International and acclaimed gospel singer, Sylmadel, social worker and peer support specialist, and David Gabriel, construction worker and brother of homicide victim Gabriel. Now, one of the things, so welcome panelists. One of the things, of course, is that when we're planning our future with someone, rarely are we thinking about an exit plan. Yet the reality for many is that the experience of abuse that becomes a pressing issue for them as they become aware that their relationship or their relationships are not what they had envisioned. I want to begin with Reverend Joan. Can you just share with us, please, as a pastor and as a singer, why was it important for you to tell your story? And, please share a little bit of your story as well in terms of what your experience was.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Jackie, for the very warm invitation. I also want to thank Susan, the founder of Mama Watali, for this great work that she is doing that is very, very, very much needed. So as you said, I've been a gospel singer. I started singing when I was very young. I recorded my first album when I was 22 years old. I got married at 23 years and got married to a clergy. And of course, as you have mentioned, that when you get married, you are not planning of exiting. I had my dreams and I was very sure that I have gotten the right person for me, especially being in ministry and myself being in ministry. And so when I started realizing that there is abuse, it was during very, very early years of my marriage. And the hardest thing for me to leave was because of the fact that I'm a public figure. I was a household name in many homes. My songs were hitting the charts. And of course, now you're married to a clergy who is also a minister of the gospel. And so the image that I was going to, to taint became such a burden. The other thing was that I just got married and got the children came right after. My firstborn was born 4 months after marriage, and the other one came the second year. So I have 2 children now that are following each other. I'm a public figure, I'm a church minister, and also remember in our African culture that marriage looks like everything. Like the burden of making it in that marriage is heavily on a woman. So by not making it, you are actually becoming somebody like a black sheep, or someone that is not, have failed not just the society, you have failed your parents, you have failed the Christians, you have failed the woman, you have failed your career as a gospel musician. So that became such a torment for me for many, many years. And I could go sing in meetings and people are blessed, but I don't know where I'm going to go back home, because either the door will not be opened or I'll be beaten that night. And the following day I have to go to church. I'm leading worship in the church. And it was, as Susan said, the hardest thing for a woman is actually to live. So you know that you are in danger. You know that anytime you can lose your life. But how to live is a problem, because he's also threatening you. It is either I have you or nobody will. So you stay, or if you leave, I'll kill you. So and I knew that he's capable of doing that because he's a public person, influential, somebody who has all the connections. And either African, sometimes there's a lot of corruption in our country. So sometimes one can even buy justice. So it became such a torment for me for many, many years.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Reverend Joan. And, what you're bringing into the space, sometimes we hear isolation, but you're really detailing the isolation pressures, if you will, in terms of not only family pressures in your role as a clergy or as a pastor. There are those church pressures. Then there's also the public image that you have as well. And I think you said earlier that you started seeing the signs early in your marriage. I think one of the articles I read as early as 5 years. And yet it was year 20 that your exit plan came in. What was the difference between year 5 and year 20? Why was that moment at year 20 significant for you to say, this is it, either I leave now or I don't make it out here alive?
I think especially the first early years of marriage, I consulted many people, and all they told me is that it's gonna change. He's still very young. And then when you hit the 35, 40, they tell you these are middle age crisis. He will man up, and so you keep believing and hoping that things will change and praying, and but it came to a place when I realized that it becoming worse and worse and worse every day. And now not only is he threatening of killing you, he's actually trying to. And then I realized that children have really completely become disoriented, devastated, and completely lost hope. And the children have now matured. My son, when I left him, was about 14 years, was 17 years old. So the young man now has started always trying to defend the mother. And you see, now that's where the fight will break. I one time actually sat down and I said, you know what, I'm either gonna lose my son or lose them both, because my son stood and said, you're not going to hit my mother again as I watch. And he said, you'd rather kill me first before you hit. So I realized now this one is going to be, because he's a man now, he's going to defend himself. And that is going to either, I looked at him and I said, what if he hits the father and then he goes to jail, or maybe, something like this happens. So I realized it becoming worse and worse every day. But I would say the turning point was when I got a visa to come to Canada, because I knew for sure that is not a place that he can reach me. And that became quite an exit plan for me. An exit, I would say a miracle, because I had planned about, they say before a woman leaves, they have actually left many times before they really leave. So I had tried leaving many times, but it was not possible. So I would say that this coming to Canada really became such an exit for me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I want to go to David now. David, I want to begin by just expressing my deep regrets that you lost your sister Marie. Can you just tell us a little bit about who Marie was and your relationship?
We both grew up in Gambia and came to Canada in 2007. And me and her had a very close bond before we became teenagers and went to high school. So from there on, she was, we were very close. We would talk regularly. And she was very a pleasant girl to be around with. She was always likes to laugh and be happy around people and just to be playful, Yeah.
So did you have any inkling of the relationship that she was in terms of the danger that she was in?
I kind of had some signs were there, but it was sort of they made it seem like I was just overlooking things. So then they would explain, oh, it's nothing, it's this and that, and then I was like, okay. And then it just became serious that me and him, we never got along. And then basically he isolated her from me, I would say. And would just turn her, he would just manipulate her mind, saying, okay, you have to stay away from your brother. He's trying to cut into our relationship. He doesn't want us to be together, which is true, but for the right reasons. So then that's where it became, my sister was very manipulated by him, that now she's alone with him, living with him, and then they had kids together. So it became more of, oh shoot, now I'm really stuck because I have kids with him.
I can't even begin to imagine the heartache, that as a family you go through when you got the word, because I think in one of the articles I read, it said, one of the things you said, it was not supposed to end like this. Can you share, because I think sometimes also we don't think or get that behind the scenes look at what this does to a family when the threat becomes real and gets acted out. So can you share a little bit, share as much as you're comfortable in sharing in terms of what impact this has had on your family, her kids, and you and the rest of your family, please?
Yeah. So the threats really began, like he would threaten her, I'll beat you and I'll kill you, and all these words he used on her. I would try and get her away, but then he would just find a way to message her again, just to manipulate her, thinking, oh, I have changed, you need to come back, we have kids, we can work it out. He just played a very good game. And then she would go back, and then we would lose touch again. So it all has happened. We warned her, you have to stay away from him, it's not good. She tried to go away a few times, many times, and then she just she couldn't stay away. She just had to go back. She kept on going back, right? And for the family, it's very traumatizing, because it's like something we've never experienced before, and it's just she's very young to just go like this, and to go to be dead in the hands of the guy that we warned her to stay away from, you know. So it makes us feel like, okay, there's things we should have done a little bit better. We should have been more aggressive in our warnings, maybe, and get her away from there, right?
I mean, and this is one of those things, because one of the things I also read, and you know, I can only share your story from what I've read in the papers, because one of the articles I read also spoke about that she had tried several times to leave, as you're saying, but including one of the times when she secured housing, he moved into the house with her, even though she did not want that to be the case. Were any of your family members, aware of any kind of support services that you could tap into, or you didn't think it had escalated to this point where she could actually lose her life?
So we talked after she messaged me and said, oh, she's left him for good, there's no way she's going back. And then I said, okay, that's great, whatever you need, I'm here for you. And I said to her that, okay, as long as just let him see the kids, if it has to be the weekend, that he comes and takes the kids, because they have 2 kids together. So and then he filed some police report saying that she didn't want him to see the kids. So I advised her to let him see the kids. But she never told me that he went back and lived with her, right? So that was kind of like a big shocker to me, because I was like, okay, she's out of there, but she wanted to have a relationship with me, but it was in hiding. When her relationship with me when she would talk to me, because the guy didn't approve of her talking to me. He knew that I would tell her to get away from him. So she didn't really want to tell me about him moving in until I found out, unfortunately, when she passed. So we did not know there was any support system. I didn't get in touch in any support system kind of thing. The only thing was the housing, and basically just she called police regularly. That's it.
How are her children doing now?
They're okay. They're living very young, so they it's hard for them to understand. But the oldest one is about 3 years old, the same age as my daughter, and she's always kind of like my mommy looking for a mom, because they have that bond. So it's not like you just because you put another face into your life, you know. So the difficulty is when they grown up, you know, and they start asking, and you have to give them the answers, right? So right now it's just, you know, trying to keep them happy and occupied in whichever way we can when we see them. So
David, I'm sending you a big virtual hug. I know that wasn't easy, so thank you for sharing that with us. Sylmadel, I want to go to you as a social worker and a peer support specialist who's worked with women and families in so many of these situations. What would you say are some of the essentials for, well, let me ask you what you've heard so far, and in terms of, you know, is this atypical of what you've dealt with before, and how do we get to a place of developing a plan? How do women get to a place to develop a plan and leave? Because we hear that there have been several steps along the way in both situations, but it just didn't materialize in the way that they would like it to in one situation, but then in the other one, it was to leave a country to be able to get that sense of safety. So Sylmadel, can you just pipe in on what you've heard so far, please?
Thanks. Thank you, Jackie. It's really a really heavy heart that I listened to those stories, both of them. I have to say that it's I can actually feel my heart hurting, and I welcome this opportunity to be part of this panel, but this is very close to me, so I cannot deny that they have both touched me. different ways. A little bit about me. At 19, I was at York University lamenting in a women's studies meeting that I don't have a job. And someone says, I have a job for you. And at the time, working in a shelter for abused women and children and making $19 an hour, which was unheard of. So I took the job with no experience, with nothing, no ideas, nothing. I was a feminist by then, a young feminist. So I knew a bit about violence against women, but from a feminist perspective, more of a theoretical perspective. So I was just launched into a shelter for abused women and children. I spent 25 years working as a frontline worker in shelters for abused women and children. When I came to Ottawa in 1989, I should just back up a little bit. In Toronto, I worked in at least 3 shelters, and basically they're run the same way, you know, a feminist collective and a board and frontline workers tending to the needs of women and children escaping violence. When I came to Ottawa, I realized that there was something lacking in the shelter here. There was no relationship between race and violence. And that was, to me, very shocking. And one example was, you know, the government pays a per diem for women and children per day. And basically women, regardless of their background, were being given the same food to eat. And we all know that when we're not feeling well, we like to have food that brings comfort. So you know, one of the first things I brought to the board was women should be allowed to buy the food they need. Give them the money, let them buy the food they need. So I remember the first day a Korean woman came and she filled the sink with crabs. But you know what? That was her choice. And those are the things that she needed to feel satisfied. Listening to these stories, I come also from the perspective of working in shelters and also living in a shelter. And I think that if it were not for the integrity and the honesty of Reverend Joan and David and sharing your stories, I don't think that I would be at a place where I could actually open that up in a real way. And for me, I have not been able to speak about it or write about it as yet, because it's from both perspectives, it has been very interesting. Also, I work, I'm a trained peer support worker. What that means is that I work within a very specific guidelines of being a peer support worker. I think the person who presented first spoke about working in a peer way and supporting. Peer support is a very specific way of working for people who have similar experience. So women who have experienced violence, working in a peer support model is a very efficient way of mutual support. As mentioned before, you don't give advice, you share your experience. The experience, and one of the things that was mentioned before is why women stay. When we force women to leave or suggest women leave, we're basically doing the same thing that abusers do. We're not giving them autonomy to make choice. And women stay for very many different reasons. You know, and I would suggest at the base of why women stay is that there are not enough resources for women to go to, you know, and it's not in all cultures where there's violence against women that the women leave the home. You know, in some cultures, it's actually the man that leaves the home. And I think that is a conversation that needs to be had when women and children are being forced to leave the home, the security of their home, and to live in shelters, and abusers are allowed to stay at home. I think that is a conversation that has to be had. Similarly, in the early 80s, Black women were no longer pressing charges against violent partners because of, you know, they're afraid of what the police might do to their partners when the police enter. And that's another reason why police should not be the first one to enter those kinds of situations. So I just want to suggest that there are other models to dealing with an escape plan that is not the police, and also recognizing that there's a relationship between racism and violence in the home as
well. Ooh, you just brought in a whole, I mean, you've just expanded the circle in a really dynamic way there. So I just want to dig a little bit deeper on a couple of things, please. And, you know, you brought up this this relationship between race and violence. Can you share a little bit more about that, please?
So I will start with prior to the early 80s, when a woman experiences violence at home, it would be the police, the woman would press the charge. So then, you know, he would come back and he's all sweet. And, you know, baby, I didn't really mean that. You know, I'm really sorry. Look what you made me do. You know, I really didn't mean it. You know, I love you more than anybody else loves you. You know, I'm the best for you. You know that you need me, you love me. So he comes back, he has that conversation with her and he said, you know, I didn't mean it. So she goes down to the local police station, or she doesn't show up in court and she drops the charges. So then nothing happens. He comes back home and the cycle repeats. She called the police again. He sweet talks her again and she drops the charges again. So the first action that we took as a political action from the shelter movement was let the police press charges against these abusers just as if you were abused by a stranger. So if I'm walking down the street and somebody harasses me, abuses me, I can call the police and the police will charge them with violence and that you've hurt me, but you know, that they will do that. But in every other case, it was the woman who was left to press charge. So that was one of the significant changes that was made. I think one of the things that we can also do is have public being educated. And I notice of late that it's violence against women, even though it has escalated during COVID, almost quadrupled during COVID, you know, because their lack of shelter spaces, afraid of COVID, women were forced to stay at home with abusers. So those numbers are not being tracked right now, but the shelter movement is not able to accommodate everyone. And what happens when Black women or racialized women go in the shelter? It's a whole different conversation because they fear that the police might enter your home and might beat your man or might kill your man. So which one is worse? So that's a conversation that women have as well. And, you know, the idea of racism in the shelter is also a conversation. Why women, you know, women are so often reluctant to leave. I think the reasons why women stay is as varied as the woman is herself.
Right. Wow, this is such a deeply complex issue and it's so interwoven and interconnected. I want to go back to Reverend Joan, and it's to just do a little bit of query based on something that Sylmadel put into the space. And it's this idea of the autonomy of making choice. You know, you seem like a very resilient, strong, resourceful woman. So Reverend Joan, can you share with us in terms of what was happening for you internally to, you know, for you to listen for the choices that you could make, so that autonomy of choice, or how did you build that agency for yourself through this challenge?
That's a deep question.
I know you spoke earlier about your son and those things, but I'm just listening for you personally. What was there for you? And did you feel that you could make that choice, or was it something that was building inside of you, or did you feel you have the agency to make that choice, or the authority to make that choice for yourself?
At the beginning, I didn't. As the panelist that spoke before me said, it is a very hard thing for a woman to do, to leave. It's the hardest decision that you can ever make. And because there are so many other things that surround you. But in me, I have the vision and the dream of becoming. And the Queen's Ministry and to empower women all over the world is eating me up. And I'm in my heart, I really want to empower a woman, but I'm asking myself, how will I empower anyone if I am not empowered myself? How will I tell somebody to be free when I am already bound? Mm-hmm. And then there is the struggle of asking myself, if I cannot make it in this marriage, then how will I even tell women how will I, because I'm one person who really love marriages. So it was a very hard choice to make. And also the feeling of the loss, feeling like I have lost a lot of years in my life in this marriage, so it has to work. And this also the perspective of the circle, because I truly love this man, and every time there would be the abuse happening and the fight and everything, and I would run away and then go to my parents and then speak to my parents and ask them, what do I do? And then he comes again and repents and says he will not do that again. And because you love him and you really want him to work, then you go back again. So it becomes like a circle that has got no exit. But it builds as you continue, and it reaches somewhere that I got into a place that I was like the 4 lepers in the Bible that said that if I stay here, I will die. But even if I go, there are the chances of surviving are very low, because I know it's going to be very hard for me to make it in life because of the image and the music industry, the music ministry as a gospel minister, as a preacher and a divorcee. I mean, I knew the chances of making it are very minimal. And so I said, if I stay here, I will die. If I go, I don't know whether I'll survive. But however, I would rather die as I try.
Well, thank you for sharing that. David, I want to come back to you. When your sister passed, she was only 24 years old. One of the things, again, one of the quotes I read was you said, if you wish you had been more persistent to just make sure that she was actually okay, not just pretending to be okay. Have you had any reflections, David, in terms of what that pretending to be okay looked like, and what would you give some of our listeners now in terms of what that pretending to look okay looked like?
I saw it every time I saw her. I could see it. Like I noticed it, but she convinced me it was okay. So it was basically, she was just very uncomfortable whenever she saw me, and she would, it's hard to explain it. But
well, I just invite you to just listen, because one of the things we also want to get that sharing of some of the things that folks may look for that they may not, they may be missing now for someone that's in their circle.
What really stood out to me, that when I reflected and that I kind of looked over, was that she would just be saying, "Oh, it's okay, it's fine. He will change. He's just tired. He's just working hard." But that's just making an excuse for him, So, and she would always just basically say, "It's okay, it's okay," and like you would see, like wherever she goes, she's really not herself. She's not comfortable. Like when she comes over to my place, she's looking at her phone. He's texting, asking, "Where are you?" And she basically has to lie and says, "I'm either home or visiting a friend." So you could see like they're very uncomfortable whenever they have to talk to that partner. So you have to
and it's
really
not like they're being their true selves.
Exactly, yeah. So I would say whenever you're communicating with a partner. Well, sorry, whenever the person is communicating with their partner, just pay attention and see they will give off signs. They'll see, you'll see it in their eyes. They're not comfortable talking to him, and they have to make up some kind of lie just to kind of bypass where they are or what they're doing, So.
Well, thank you for that. And if any other ideas, if any other thoughts come to you as we go for the conversation, please let us know if there's some other insights you can share on that. I just want to remind our participants that if you have a question, please put into the Q&A and we'll bring your voice into the space as well. Sylmadel, I want to go back to you and just to, could you tell us what an exit plan might look like for someone who at an early stage that they're recognizing that they're being abused or getting, that sense of being uncomfortable, something is not happening the way that I had envisioned it would happen, and my life could very much be at stake here. As well as, for someone who's at a later stage, what are the exit plans and what are some of the key things to listen for in terms of developing an exit plan? I love how Reverend Joan spoke about there's something inside of her that had a vision that kept calling her in some ways. So what are some of those exit plan strategies? I know it's a life or death situation or it's a survival mode that you're in at that point, but what are some of those things that folks can just listen for and to to begin to put some foundation in terms of that plan to exit an abusive relationship.
Thank you for that. And I want to say to you, David, that my heart goes out to you, and I am so sorry for your loss. Thank you. Once a woman, and I'm going to speak of women because 4 of 10 women are experience violence. I'm speak of women, which is not to say that men or transgender individuals are not experience violence as well. In the early stage, once you've identified that something is off, your instincts will start telling you something has shifted. As David said, it's usually isolation, and start speaking negatively about your friends or family. They don't love you as much as I love you. We should move a little bit out of town. We should move somewhere far away from, and once that happens, control starts exerting itself, because violence is about power and control. So once you sense a shift, what can you do? Tell someone. Tell someone. Second thing, secure your papers, your passport, all your health cards, your documents, and the documents of your children. Put them someplace else away from your home. Pack a bag. In that bag, you have a change of clothes. You have your essential toiletries that you might need, any medication that you have, anything that is important to you, pack those. Put those at the home of someone you trust, or hide it somewhere in your house where you know that your partner will not find it. Keep talking, keep listening, keep watching. If it escalates, and this is the best case scenario of a woman who's decided that she's going to leave. Because it seems that women have a relationship with men because, the Reverend said, you love him. You planned a life with him. You have children with him. People are expecting you to survive this, When your marriage failed, you have failed, and it often reflects more on women than on men, So there's a whole barrage of emotions. Women may stay for the children, but one thing that women need to understand is this. If you have sons and you stay for the children, you're basically teaching your boys to become abusers. If you have daughters and you stay in a marriage, you're teaching your daughters to put up with abuse, because children learn what they live. This is what they know as normal until they go in other places and see, wait a minute, this is not normal. Similar for sexual violence, and as when they go to other places and see, this is not normal. So that is in the early stages. One of the things you can do, you call the shelter. Most shelters, they have a page. If you're on the page, trying to get information from the shelter, and someone enters the room, you can just click it and it will pop up with the City of Ottawa logo. So the shelters themselves, they have an escape strategy online. If you're looking for information, just press it and it will go. So basically that's it. More long-term in terms of staying, I would suggest the same things as the short-term, but find ways to protect yourself, because I will never, ever suggest to a woman that she leaves. What I do is facilitate leaving. I think that having access to a car and making sure, if you do, make sure that there's always gas in it and it's in good repair. Learn to park your car facing out as opposed to reversing out. That is also, an important thing to be able to do, and also find, if you're not comfortable going to a shelter, find a friend or family member, that you have confidence in, that may not have, that may actually side with you. And I'm saying it like that, so they will not give access to, the partner who's hounding you. In terms of leaving, try to leave when he's not home. That's the best way, because a lot of violence, a woman from Trinidad, Shirley Samaru, died while she was trying to leave while he was home. Because remember, violence is about power and control. And leaving, you're basically asserting your own control, your own autonomy over your life. So you're basically challenging your abuser. And that can be very vulnerable or lethal for women. So we suggest you leave when he's not home. And finding a safe place to stay. Make sure you save some money. If that means taking a few dollars off the grocery bill, because one form of violence is financial abuse. A lot of abusers, they keep tabs on to the penny. Because if you don't have access to money, including oftentimes women's paychecks as well, if you don't have access to money, you have access to nothing. So if you have to find a way to save a few dollars, put it away so you will not be destitute, that is also a good thing to do. So secure your documents, any medication you may have, and it's similarly for your children, change of clothes that you might want or need. Okay. And in the event that there's violence in the home and the police does attend, what the police does, they isolate you, they have a conversation. They may take him to Elgin Street for 24 hours. In that time, you have an opportunity to leave. Or if you leave and you have not taken everything you need, the police will give you a 2-hour maximum escort to go back to your home where you can retrieve the things that you need. So those would be the strategies that and any circles that you can join. Remember, you are never, ever, ever alone. Can't be 4 out of 10 women, and it does not include, some women. So, and it's not your fault. Women need to understand that escaping is your resilience. It shows your will to survive. It shows, and I mean, we rebuild our lives, we rebuild our lives with our violence. And as the sister said, it's either if I stay, I'm going to die. But if I leave, I might swim and survive. So that would be my advice to women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all those great suggestions and, well, not suggestions, strategies, really. Because one of the things that you mentioned earlier to Sylmadel is COVID has just, erupted again, violence and sexual assault and femicide in Canada. Mama Watelli recently received a letter from the executive director of the Canadian Women's Foundation, who noted that the increase that's happening, it's what many of us feared, confirmed many times over, that we are in a crisis of increased gender-based violence. And even though there's some reporting going on, there's always the question of how many more are not being reported. So given that this is very much a hardcore reality in our space right now, not a small number of people, but a significant number of people are going through this experience. Reverend Joan, what can you suggest in terms of what can we do to turn this tide of abuse and to give survivors of gender-based violence a reason to hope as we move through this challenging time as well?
I would say you're already doing it right now, tonight. I would say Mama Watelli is doing an amazing job. I would say that all women need to rise up and talk and speak, because the hardest thing is talking, is saying. I will tell you for a fact that even after I left my marriage, I was not able to talk about exactly what happened to my life until 4 years later. So it takes a lot of courage to actually speak it out. And by telling our stories, we are empowering other women to actually talk about it and to know about abuse, because I actually stayed for a long time without knowing that this is really abuse. I was not able. Is it really abuse, or is it that he loves me when he says I don't, when he looks at my phone, when he tracks my calls? Is it because he's protecting me, or I actually did not know that this was abuse until when it's escalated to violence. So by talking about it, the more we speak about it, the more we have these kind of conferences, meetings. When I spoke about my story, I have received a lot of calls and emails from women telling me, you speaking about it, let me know that it is possible for somebody to actually exit and still survive. And so many have been able to leave their marriages and they're rebuilding their lives, and they are able to stand up again. So by speaking about it, by being vocal, by looking for resources, by advocating for women who have empowered themselves academically, have earned the education that they need to push them to important and serious positions in the government, which they can be able to advocate for women who do not have a voice.
Reverend Joan, there's something you said that I just really want to invite you to speak a little bit more about. Number one was that sense of, 4 years after leaving the marriage, being away, you still were feeling somewhat silent still to share that experience. But the other thing you said was that even when you were going through the process, you were even questioning, is this abuse? Because abuse is so often attached to violence, the physical violence. And Sylmadel just spoke about the financial abuse that can also happen.
Yes.
Really just speak to someone, speak to the Marie at 21, 22, 23, 24. What is abuse? Because those are things that we're not taught necessarily about what is abuse. So from your experience, what would you say are those indications of abuse? And for a woman at any stage to then be able to start listening to be able to use some of those strategies that Sylmadel spoke about so powerfully a few moments ago.
There are many types of abuse. There is the psychological abuse, there is a physical abuse, there's a sexual abuse, there's emotional abuse, and mental abuse. And most of the times it starts with emotional abuse. It starts with, and I would say that I had written something here. I want to probably just give a definition of what is mental abuse or psychological abuse. Psychological abuse is often called emotional abuse. It's a form of abuse that is characterized by a person subjecting or exposing another to a behavior that may result into psychological trauma, including anxiety, chronic depression, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So psychological abuse is the most common because someone is not hitting you, is not causing you any physical damage. So you're actually not recognizing it is abuse, but this person is consistently exposing you to behaviors that are causing you a lot of trauma, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of depression. For example, someone who has cheated on you, has lied to you, has taken your money without you knowing, has sold your properties without you knowing, that is now actually economic abuse. So they start with psychological abuse, where they have also, they use very verbal words that are very insulting and over criticizing, also gaslighting, and as you said, they're also very good at separating you from people who are a support system in your life. They would make sure that you don't have friends around you. They'll make sure that your relatives don't visit you, because when your relatives come home, they're either exposed to he would so show them an attitude to make sure that he chases them away from you. And then when they succeed psychologically abusing you, now they come to economic abuse. That is where they get you very well, because someone said before me that when you don't have control over your finances, you don't have control over everything. One of the things that abusers do is that they make sure that you do not have access to even the money that you're making yourself. And they'll come in a very good way. Can we have a joint account? And then they make sure that this joint account, you don't have access to the money, but the money, you deposit the money to that account. And as the submissive woman you want to be, in the Bible, where they say a woman submit to their husband, you don't have a problem submitting your economic power to the man that you love, your own husband, the father of your own children. That is how you're taught how to be a good wife. Before you realize you don't have access to any money, and you cannot make decisions, because if you don't have money muscle, then you cannot make decisions that concerns your life. Where do you build a house in the future? What do you eat in the evening? What do you dress? What do you do for Christmas? So he makes sure that those kind of decisions are the decisions that he can only make. Mm-hmm. You say something powerful. Someone as an early age, as 21-year-old who just got married, it's very hard for you to know these things. So I would say it is very important for us to educate ourselves even before marriage about the red flags. we're supposed to check on.
Mhm.
So when you see that red flag, then you know it is time to run.
Well, I thank you so much for that, because I think you've just given some really key red flags to look at from different levels, psychologically, emotionally, financially, and physically. So thank you for that. David, I want to come back to you with the same question. What can we do to turn this tide of abuse? What is it that, from a family perspective, as those who were there to support Marie, what is it that we can do to, as families, to let folks know that we're there for you? What is it? What is that there for you to turn this, to reduce this level of abuse in our society right now?
Tough question to answer, but I would just put myself.
So let me ask it this way: what
Yeah.
would you wish was there to support Marie to turn that abuse in a different way?
Well, I just something that
Not that
reminded
it's
me
an
so much.
easier question, but just
Yeah. I don't remember her name, but she spoke about police get involved first, and the guy should get charged as a stranger.
Mhm.
So the same thing I would have said, because she had called the cops twice on him, and then basically he came back and just basically pleaded, "Oh, please drop the charges, this and that." And then she just went back, excuse me, and dropped the charges, right? So I feel like in these situations, it doesn't matter if the woman goes back and says, "Oh, I'm dropping the charges." I think the police should really have a conversation with the man. He should receive some kind of I don't want to say punishment assessment, so that they can really analyze the situation. Because if they had really looked at the situation, seen how bad it was, it wouldn't have escalated, might have not escalated to this point, right? So really the police really have
So
to do
she
a better
reached
job.
out to the resources that she knew.
That's
It's how to
exactly.
strengthen that in terms of ensuring that when those calls are made, it's taken to the highest level of seriousness.
Exactly. They should be always taken to the highest level of seriousness, because that's my on that.
Thank you so much for that. Sylmadel, I want to come back to you. The same question: what can we do to turn this tide of abuse and to give survivors of gender-based violence reason to hope as we move through this very challenging period called COVID or recession or whatever it's going to show us? Because I mean, that's what it tells us. And during these tough times, it escalates, right? So
yes. But I thank you for the question, Jackie. I think we have to recognize violence against women as a social determinant of health. Women are prey to men. We may not like to say it that way, but the thing that harms women the most as men, not jaguars or dogs, is men. We have to have those conversations. Men have to hold men accountable for their behavior. I'm waiting to see the march where men get out, make their placards and go out and say, we no longer will put up with this. The men who abuse women, we no longer want you in the club. You're out, We have to have those conversations that this is not acceptable. We have to recognize that it's gender equality of women. When we're making, 73 cents to the dollar, that's a problem. It's a systemic problem. The police does not recognize violence against women the same way as other crimes, because one of the occupations most responsible for violence against women are cops. High number of women who experience violence are the partners of police officers. So, as long as women continue to be considered second-class citizens, our concerns will not be treated as seriously as man against man violence, for example, because if a man beats up a man the way the man beats up a woman, surely he will be charged in a different way. Cops often will even encourage women to stay, he loves you, like that. So I think that, WHO has also decided that, at least mandated, that violence against women, 1 in 4, is a major crisis of women worldwide. And I'm not sure the numbers, because as Jackie mentioned earlier, women are not, have not reported, because, you know, you're locked down with your abuser, for God's sakes. You have no place to go because you're afraid of COVID. And I just wanted to say, in addition to the types of violence, there's also spiritual violence and cultural violence. You know, we see that primarily among marginalized communities. You know, spiritual violence, you're not, if you're, let's say, for example, you're Muslim, you marry out of your religion, and then you can't practice your religion anymore. So that has taken a significant part of your own identity away from who you are. And violence against women at its very core is changing your identity, becoming something that I want you to be rather than who you are. Closing down your wings in a relationship as opposed to being able to opening them very wide. That is violence. Another one that I want to mention is also cultural. You know, you marry someone who doesn't share your culture, you can no longer do your practices, your food, or it takes you someplace where they're not available. You're living somewhere over your land, you can't get a piece of stockfish or yam or whatever it is that you eat in your culture. So that's basically denying you a significant part of who you are. So that's those two I would like to add to it, because we're also seeing that more and more. You know, we need to start having these conversations. And I agree, this is, you know, as a forum to continue having and continuing, you know, public education about violence. And it's to never be, you know, during International Women's Day, or it's because it's happening every day. We need to change a conversation that when a man kills his partner, it's a love triangle thing. No, it's actually murder. You know, we need to take the romanticism out of that milieu totally, that, you know, it's a crime. And then until it's treated like that, then, you know, we're basically going to stay where we are, where we don't have enough resources for the number of women who are experiencing intimate violence.
Well, I want to thank you for presencing the spiritual and the cultural violence as well, because I think there's also another part of it, because you're also really anchoring this as well in kind of the systemic nature of violence, and within the systems and structures that we have. For us to, it's okay because it's a dynamic where women are seen to be still less than, even within the North American context. So when you give a stat like 1 in 4 globally, that includes Canada, that includes North America. It's not as though it's over there somewhere, because I think part of the cultural violence as well is the denial that it continues even within, especially within North America. And so we look at the violence in other countries, we look at the violence in other cultures, and we say that is where the problem is. I think one of the things I heard in terms of stats in one of the Mama Watali sessions is like, and this is even, you know, about a year ago that I heard this, I don't know what the current stat is, but it was that the rate of violence in particular for against women was up like 300 to 400%. That's just within this particular time period. So really, I want to thank you for anchoring that systemic nature, and that this is not an individual thing, but it's a system conversation that we're really having. David, I want to go back to you a little bit in this whole context of systems and the system of family. And what are the, you know, what are some of the things that in Mama Watali's support network, what are some of the things that you would want to see as a support space for families that are going through this, you know, very tragic experience that you and your family have been going through because of Marie's death?
So basically just a support system where you can just basically find somebody you can talk to, tell them what you're going through. From my experience going through all this, I think it all just helped, just getting it out, talk to somebody and just get it out, because if you just keep bottling it up, it just becomes harder and harder. And it just affected my whole day-to-day life, you know. Everything I did reminded me of it, or the kids reminded me of it. So I just talked to somebody and explained to them what's going on. And if that person didn't want to listen, I just moved on to the next person. That's it.
So you have some choice in the matter.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
always so this is the so in Mama Wadali, what I'd like to see is like yeah, support system where, you know, nobody's gonna be judging you. You can just go and there'll be ears for you to just kind of tell them the problem, and they can find a way to kind of guide you, you
Mhm.
know, give you tell you, yeah, what do you call it? I'd give you some advice on how to deal with a situation that you're in. And
Well, you know, one of the things I heard earlier is about, it's not about giving advice necessarily, but just sharing stories so you can learn from the stories, learn from the wisdom.
yeah,
And I think that space of just knowing that you're not alone
mm,
helps as well.
yeah, it does very much help. Yeah,
Mhm. So I'm
lonesome
hearing the
is
Mama
a very
Watelli
bad thing.
circles being there for families, not just individual, but families, the whole family.
The family, yeah.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Um, just a reminder, folks, we have a few more minutes. So please, if you do have a question that you want to ask on the panelist, or you want to have a comment put into the space, you have a couple of minutes left to do that. I just want to go back to Sylmadel, please, for a moment. And just, you did such a fabulous job of speaking about some of those tips again. I just really want to anchor them again, or just to kind of just share some of those spaces for folks to look at in terms of what that exit strategy could look like. What are some of the considerations? Kind of pairing them or marrying with those different stages or different levels of violence, and what are some of those things? Because you added that spiritual and cultural piece there at the end as well. So are there, just to kind of refresh us a little bit in terms of what are those strategies for your exit plan?
Yeah, I was at the shelter one night and a woman came. She was 89 years old, a French. She had 14 children, and she left her husband. Actually, he had trained her to, and I please trigger warning. He chained her to the bed and brought a prostitute to their marriage bed. That's basically, and she left. And her children, they came, they knew where she was, and they kept on pressuring her, "Ma, come back, come back." One night I was talking to her and I asked her, she was married at 14. After all these years, why did you leave? And she said, "I just want one day of peace."
Mm.
She did go back because at that point in her life, she didn't feel that she could envision a life away from that situation, but she wanted a day of peace. As I said before, secure your documents. Your passport, your birth certificate, your marriage certificate as well, your children's health cards, everything that you will need to navigate in the society, because you don't want to have to go start reapplying and all of that. Secure those, pack a bag, start hiding some money, start telling people, because one of the things that happen is that when women leave and they have not shared, and all of a sudden you're in the shelter, well, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything. You didn't say, you never mentioned. Is it really true? I don't believe that, because these men present really, really, really well away from you. They present well. They don't treat their boss or their friends the way they treat you. So if you have not been sharing your experiences with anyone and you get up and you leave, because it's going to look like that, you never told anybody. So the support you would have had, you've lost that support because you kept it private. And women do keep it private because they believe it's just them, Pack a bag, pack something to wear to a possible job interview. Take all your toiletries, some casual clothes, school clothes for the kids school records, all those things. Leave a bag at a friend, someone you trust, not somebody who's going to talk to your partner. "Oh, so-and-so left the bag here." No, even, find someplace secure to leave that bag. And like I said, park your car facing outwards. It's important, okay? Because that way, he does not have access to you from the windshield at the front when you're leaving, because you're actually driving out. If you don't have a car, find a friend with a car and have their phone number handy, and let them understand what's happening, that regardless of what you're doing, when I call, I'm going to need you to come at that time. I can't wait 5 minutes. I'm going to need for you to come. Leave when your partner is not home. Let your neighbors know that you are being abused. I know it's shameful because we think we've done it. I understand that, but this is about your safety. And your safety means that when the police comes, they're going to talk to your neighbors. Did you know anything was going on over there? And you normally see it in the paper. Neighbors report that this is another visit. The police came often. Or neighbors reported that they were a nice, calm family, as was done in Markham, where the partner killed his partner and 3 children. Oh, they were a great family. They were fantastic, you know? Let your neighbors know, like, look, this is happening at my place, okay? So that's something you can do as well. Let your doctor know. Okay. And one of the things I want to marry as well is violence and mental health. You know, you will feel scared. You will be depressed. All of these things will happen. But then, like the sister said, it's a choice between my survival or my not survival. You know, and I think we, as a society, we need to constantly remind women in our churches. Because one of the things about, you know, violence is that if you pray hard enough, then it will stop, you know, but you're not believing enough. Your faith is weak. All of these things keep women in those situations. I'm saying for the children, which does not work at all. Children who've experienced violence become violent, but usually, statistically speaking, they also perpetrate violence, you know, so staying for the children, it does nothing other than expose them to more violence. You know, and I recognize these things are hard to hear because I believe women always act in their interest of their children.
Yeah.
You know, but basically, what are we saying? You know, and as I mentioned before, as we have more and more interracial relationships and interfaith relationships, we need to pay attention to those things as well. Is he stopping you from observing your day? Is it stopping you from, is he isolating you? You know, as David mentioned before, it is a very, very classic. You know, what happened to Marie was very, very classic case of violence. There was not one portion of that story that was shocking to me, unfortunately, because it just followed a very common trajectory. I'm the only person who loves you. I'm the only person who you can trust. I'm the only person you can depend on. What are you going to do without me? Because there's something that changes in the minds, in the brain of women or children who experience violence. We can look at it from children or soldiers who experience war, but in actual fact, you are also experiencing war in your home, being under constant threat. And what does that do to your body and to your mind?
Thank you for represencing that. And Reverend Joan, I want to come back to you in terms of, you know, because I'm hearing that I'm just really hearing that we really have to shift how we condition ourselves to be in relationship. You know, relationships in terms of, yes, there's romance, but there's also the flip side of romance. Yes, there's protection, but there's a flip side of protection. Yes, there's safety, but there's a flip side of safety. Yes, there is that sense of bonding, that sense of companionship, but there's a flip side of that. And we don't talk about those flip sides. We don't talk about those sides that, how do you prepare someone to say, okay, this is now what the deal is? Because each and every story tonight, and so many that I've heard, and I'm, you know, I just got to keep it together for a few more minutes.
It's hard.
This is a tough one. I'm not gonna lie. It's a tough one to go through because it's just this thing. This is, you know, I keep thinking about Marie and her life lost at 24, and we've got to stop the lying about the we've got to stop the lies. We just got to stop the lies. So Reverend Joan, let me come back to you. Let me just pull it back together. How do we start shifting the narrative about what a relationship is? How do we start shifting the narrative of what a healthy, nurturing relationship is?
Wow. I think we need to really educate our daughters and our women, and to let them know that the moment you actually stop living simply because you're married, you're actually at a very dangerous position. The moment you bury your feelings, your visions, your dreams, your friends, your relationships, everything else do not matter in your life anymore. As the panelist that spoke before me, I can't remember her name, but the social, very powerful, very, very, very powerful, educated and informative. The moment your wings are closed, not opened up, then you are in danger. And these are things that need to be taken seriously from the very beginning. Because what we do is that we bury these things, we say it is not a big deal. When you realize that this man is over jealous, you say no, it because he loves me. There's a difference between love and obsession. When somebody becomes obsessed of you, that you cannot even receive a call from a male because you're married, then there is a problem. If you cannot have a business meeting with male partners and not get questioned, there is a problem. If you cannot, if you cannot talk about some things, because there are some things that you now start hiding. If you cannot talk, cannot talk about some things with him freely and not get scared of being criticized or judged harshly, then there is a problem. If he starts criticizing how you look, your body, you're too big, you're too fat, you need to work on this, you need to do this. When you start doing so much to fit in, there is a problem. So those are things that they need to be spoken about, because we cannot know unless we are taught. As I said earlier, I didn't actually know that I was in an abusive relationship until I actually realized that I was, because nobody told me that when a man closes the door on you at night simply because you came late from a meeting, that is abuse, What I knew is that is a man marking his territory, because you are a wife, you should be there to serve him food. What if I came from a meeting, I was singing, I was in a crusade and an extravaganza, I came late, So those are the things that we need to tell our daughters. We need to educate our women to actually recognize the red flags early enough before it is too late, because abusers can actually, they continue abusing as much as you can accommodate. So today he will slap you if you accommodate it. Tomorrow it will not be just a slap. He will pick a knife and tell you, I'm going to cut you into pieces and nobody will take me anywhere. And if actually you keep quiet about that, the next time he'll actually take that knife.
Wow, great red flags itemized there. Great red flags, and how do we continue to teach ourselves and each other and the younger ones coming up about those red flags and to really talk about them. Yeah. David, I want to come back to you. Remind me, please, Marie's children, boy, girl, girls, boys?
Yeah, older one's a girl, younger one's a boy.
So I'm going to ask you this question. How are you going to support both the boy and the girl, the son and the daughter? How are you going to shift the narrative about what a healthy, nurturing relationship is for them? How will you support them to develop those? And that may be an unfair question, but I'm just listening for what have we learned as a family, from a family perspective? How do we raise resilient, resourceful young men and women such that violence is not an option? Respect and valuing each other is what love, what are you hearing for yourself in terms of how to support your niece and nephew to develop as much of a healthy notion of what a nourishing relationship is versus an abusive relationship?
We have to get rid of the idea of romance in Disney and that idea, as long as we keep saying, we talk about romance in a particular way, I am even becoming more on this agreeable to arranged marriages with a twist. Have someone who loves you, check out this person. Because when you're in love and your hormones are raging, it's really not the time to be seeing the red flags, The first date, you show up and you're wearing that red dress, and he said, honey, it looks really great. What can you put on the black one? And you jump inside and you put the black dress on and you go out. You have not noticed what happened. It's just that he likes you better in the black dress than the red dress, so you change, but you really miss the point. The next time, you look great, honey. Could you try this? I'm going to take you to the store. I'm going to, get you something. And before you know it, you've really shifted your wardrobe and you don't even notice, So we need to change the conversation, not just in terms of what we teach our young women, but what we teach our young men about what is the relationship you have with women. And I'm talking about in a heterosexual context right here, okay? What do men need to understand? Women are not your property. And, in Canada, for example, they used to have the rule of thumb. You cannot beat your wife with anything bigger than your thumb. You cannot rent a place without your husband or your partner. This is in Canada in the 1960s. So these are things about women having their autonomy and women understanding you're going in a partnership with someone else. You're not becoming someone else's property. Women have to understand, you don't have to take your partner's name to become his. These are things that we need to start. And I think it comes back right down to the equality of women. Not women becoming men, but men are men and but women and men are equal and men do not own women. And that's something that, and I heard the sister when she said that, because I grew up in Jamaica and I remember men beating women and women saying, he only does it because he loves me.
Yeah.
I've heard that. These are the things that he does because he loves me. But, somebody's kicking you in the teeth because they love you. Somebody gives you a black eye because they love you, and you go to church with the black eye, but you think it's, because men, they always blame the victim. It's you. It's you. It's you. And society blames the victim as well. It's you.
Well, it comes back to that systemic thing. It's about power and control.
Again, we need to change the narrative around romance. And I know it's a big ask because everybody likes to be caught up in the joy of romance. But when the hormones are raging, you will not see red flags. And having someone you trust and having you love, check out this person. What was the last girlfriend? Why did she leave? And I just want to say one more thing. When women have lived with abusers, interestingly enough, they will meet a nice man, but they can't be with him because women have also learned defenses against abuse. And when they meet someone who does not abuse them, they don't know what to do. It takes a long time of learning, rethinking, retraining, and recognizing that you were also a victim of a very violent space.
Woo! David, thank you, Sylmadel. Coming back to you, David.
Here I am.
So what is it that you're hoping? Let me put it this way. What is it that you hope that you will take from this experience, this tragic experience as it is, and how will you support your niece and nephew to develop healthy relationships for themselves and therefore within their partnerships if they choose to have them?
Looking at it, my daughter, my niece, I would basically try my best and teach them what a relationship should look like as opposed to ownership, because in my sister's relationship, it looked like ownership. It had the characteristics of ownership. So it didn't become a relationship. When you own something, you say, okay, well, it's got to happen this way. You do it the way you want, and that's it. That's the way it goes, right? So in my niece and daughter, I would teach them, and the boy too, teach them very well that the signs of when it becomes ownership, where it's like, okay, whatever makes you happy, now you cannot do it. That's a sign that you should start looking at somewhere else someone to talk to, because then that becomes it starts to someone is starting to isolate you, So that's what I would teach them very well, because it's a regret that I did not help my sister with. All right, so
I want to really thank you all for just being so honest and forthright and sharing your stories, your perspectives, your strategies. And I just really want to honor and celebrate you for um, on some of you are just starting to get out of that space of surviving through the tragedy, David. And again, my heart goes out to you. But then Reverend Joan, just your resilience and resourcefulness to be guided by your vision. Want to thank you for presencing that. And Sylmadel, just just straight up talk about the
That's
what so and the exit plan and just how important it is, and all of you for contributing to not only what the abuse and the isolation and all of that will look like, but also how do we start shifting the narrative and the conversation of what truly nurturing relationships are, so we can really shift this tide of violence within relationships and abuse within relationships. So thank you once again for your participation and engagement. I just want to take a few minutes now to just share some key things for the participants who are listening, for our audience. Please, we've had some folks from Mama Watali listening the space. We've had Ann Clark, project lead and social policy analyst, Susan Namawilinda, the director whom you met, and Gavashini Sinaranda, our social media specialist, and Iyun Inalu Akrinola, the project assistant and communications guru that is the sharing information. Just some thank yous again to our funders and those who have joined the conversation, from the Ontario Trillium Foundation and the Canadian Women's Foundation, and also the project's organizational mentors, the Britannia Woods Community House and the 4th Avenue Baptist Church. A few quick reminders also for you. Do not forget to use the link. I know one person has put some link in terms of how who they may want to share information with in terms of about the circles. So before you leave tonight, please just use the link if there are other persons to be contacted about the circles. And if you please fill out the needs assessment survey that will be sent to you. And if you're interested in being a mentor, please use the brochure that's on the the Mama Support Circles website and apply. And finally, an email will be sent out to all participants when today's edition has been edited and uploaded to the Mama Support Circles website and Mama Watali YouTube channel. So do not forget, stay tuned to the upcoming events. And thank you once again for joining us. And the the upcoming events on International Human Rights Day, December 12th. Human rights are human rights. So definitely stay tuned and come back again to be engaged in these powerful, dynamic conversations. Keep the circle going. Thank you once again, everyone. Good night.